Welcome to another episode of Forgotten Uniques. This is a series I'm making that's all about unique items in Path of Exile that aren't used very much, if at all, taking a look at their mechanics and interactions with other things in the game, especially ascendancy changes or newer uniques. If you want to check out the rest of the series so far, I'll link the playlist in the description below. Today's video though is all about Broken Faith, a unique shield which is exclusive to warband content. It can only be found as a drop from Renegade warband members in the Renegade base node in Delve or the Acid Caverns map, or by opening a Renegades Cache unique strongbox. Now, Broken Faith hasn't specifically received any changes since all the way back in patch 3.11 Harvest League. However, in patch 3.24 Necropolis, the Unholy Might buff was changed in a really big way. And since Unholy Might makes up one of the main parts of this shield, this change was a significant indirect buff to Broken Faith. We'll get to that part of the shield in a moment. So let's take a look at the modifiers on Broken Faith. 0.4% of chaos damage leeched as life. Now this modifier has been a bit more relevant in the past, especially for spell builds when damage type specific leech was not very accessible. These days you can get this stat on an Eldritch implicit on your gloves, while attack builds are able to access generic attack leech from many different places. With that said though, you'll always be playing a chaos damage build when you're using Broken Faith, so the leech is still going to be useful and it potentially frees up modifier slots on your other gear pieces too. Then we have minus 10% chance to block. This modifier lowers the base block on the shield from 22% down to 12%, so you'll only be gaining 12% chance to block attacks from this shield when you have it equipped. Next, we have the first of two modifiers that incentivize having no energy shield. 100% increased global armor while you have no energy shield. So the increased armor isn't a local modifier like most armor increases you'll find on gear. This one is a global increase like the increased armor modifiers you'd find on the passive skill tree nodes or on jewels. 100% increased armor is a lot from a single modifier too. Most of the passive skill tree wheels which grant increased armor provide in the region of 30 to 70% increased armor for 3 points spent, and this modifier just provides 100% increased global armor, which is very good, but it comes at the cost of requiring you to have no energy shield. Now, since every class has no energy shield by default, this wouldn't be much of a problem as you could potentially build around it, save for the fact that the Broken Faith shield itself provides a small amount of energy shield. But there are plenty of ways to guarantee having no energy shield so that this modifier is active all of the time. First, let's discuss a few ways to completely remove all of your energy shield, setting it to 0 permanently. The Agnostic is a keystone located at the top left side of the passive skill tree near the Templar start location. This keystone will set your energy shield to 0, while making it so that your mana is drained to restore any missing life. Be aware that the mana drain will be active whenever you're not on full life, including if you were to reserve some of your life. Even when you're on full unreserved life, it will only stop draining when on actual full life. This makes the Agnostic a solution that will work for some setups and not for others. So what other options are there? Well, there's Dissolution of the Flesh, a unique jewel that will also set your energy shield to 0, whilst completely overhauling the interaction of life loss from taking damage. Anytime that you'd normally lose life from taking damage, you'll reserve that life instead, and life will only become unreserved after a period of 2 seconds when no damage is taken. The jewel also provides up to 30% more life, which is crazy, especially for a life stacking build. But similarly to the Agnostic, Dissolution of the Flesh can be an awkward mechanic to work into a build. For a handful of setups this will be the perfect combination, but for the large majority they need to find a less invasive way to solve the energy shield problem. The Mask of the Spirit Drinker and its upgraded version, the Mask of the Stitched Demon, both force your energy shield to start at 0 and make it so you cannot gain energy shield while providing bonuses for the total amount of energy shield that you have. The Mask of the Stitched Demon may provide an interesting option for intelligence stacking as it grants +1 to maximum life per 2 intelligence, while the Mask of the Spirit Drinker is going to be a more universally suitable option. These helmets may be useful if you find that much of your gear provides energy shield, for example when using items such as the Fourth Vow, allowing that energy shield to grant a chunk of life regeneration, putting its use where it would otherwise be useless in this kind of setup. You can also achieve a similar effect with the Immortal Ambition Timeless Keystone. This one makes your energy shield start at 0 and drains energy shield over time, whilst also preventing energy shield regeneration or recharge. However, Immortal Ambition will recover energy shield instead of life from Life Leech whenever your life is full. You can avoid this by reserving some of your life so that you can never reach actual full life. Now, the problem with all of these solutions is that they may be too high of an investment unless they're actually providing some additional benefits to your build. You can of course use a method of self-damage to keep your energy shield at 0. The easiest choice here is the Blood Rage skill gem. Blood Rage is a buff which grants attack speed and a chance to gain frenzy charges on kill, and it will also refresh its duration on kill. The buff makes you take 4% of your maximum life and 4% of your maximum energy shield as physical damage per second, and by default this damage will be dealt to your energy shield first. The constant damage from Blood Rage will prevent energy shield from recharging, so as long as you have no forms of non-standard energy shield recovery, it will always be at 0 while Blood Rage is active. You can also use Righteous Fire for a similar solution to Blood Rage. However, RF is harder to maintain in comparison if you don't have any investment into maximum fire resistance or life recovery, but it may be the case that you already plan to use RF in your build for the more spell damage multiplier that it provides. There's also other, less consistent self-damage options too, such as Trauma Support or Bone Shatter, while Forbidden Rite deals self-chaos damage which naturally bypasses energy shield, so you need to find a way to force the damage to interact with your energy shield, such as the 30% of chaos damage does not bypass energy shield mastery available on the evasion and ES mastery wheels. However, be aware that if you are planning to use the Fourth Vow or the Divine Flesh Timeless Keystone, both of these have modifiers which will prevent some or all self-damage mechanics from dealing damage to your energy shield. The Fourth Vow makes physical damage bypass energy shield, while Divine Flesh makes all damage taken bypass energy shield, preventing all of the previously mentioned self-damage interactions. Alright, once you have a good solution for your build to keep your energy shield at 0, you'll be able to benefit from the 100% increased global armor all of the time, and it will also set you up for the next modifier on Broken Faith too. You have Unholy Might while you have no energy shield. So Unholy Might is a buff that used to provide 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage, but in 3.24 Necropolis, this buff received a very significant change. Instead of granting extra chaos damage, it now just converts 100% of your physical damage into chaos damage, whilst also providing a 25% chance to inflict the Withered debuff. Withered makes the target take 6% increased chaos damage and it stacks up to 15 for a potential 90% increased chaos damage taken. This debuff can also be improved by modifiers to Withered effect, further boosting the increased damage taken. So the Unholy Might debuff went from essentially just providing some extra damage to now enabling you to scale physical damage in a way that was either difficult or impossible before, by allowing you to use things like Withered and Withered effect, Chaos Penetration, and methods of lowering monster chaos resistance. There's a lot of different ways to utilise this buff too. The traditional Bladeful Blade Blast, or the new Blade Blast of Unloading, Blade Vortex, Ethereal Knives, Shockwave Totems, Seismic Trap, and Reap, just to name a few. You could even look into some physical attack builds such as Bone Shatter or Trauma stacking setups. There's many different ways that you could go about making use of Unholy Might, and really having 100% of your physical damage converted from a single modifier that's not on the skill gem itself is kind of insane. This is a very, very powerful buff now, and having it up permanently as one of the modifiers on Broken Faith immediately makes this an interesting, unique item for me. But there's still one more modifier on this shield. Create Profane Ground instead of Consecrated Ground. So Consecrated Ground is a defensively oriented ground effect which grants life regeneration and reduced effective curses on you while you stand on it. When you're using Broken Faith though, anytime you create Consecrated Ground, it creates Profane Ground instead. And Profane Ground is the complete opposite. A fully offensive ground effect which lowers resistances and increases the chance to be critically hit for enemies standing on it. Profane Ground will lower all resistances including chaos resistance by 10%, whilst increasing the chance for hits to be critical strikes by 100% against any enemy standing on the ground effect. You can create Consecrated Ground and thus Profane Ground in many different ways, for example the Zealotry Aura, a Sulphur Flask, or even Holy Flame Totem. Utilising this ground effect will further allow you to scale that converted damage as well, whilst also helping to enable a crit build. But be aware that any modifiers which specifically buff the effect of Consecrated Ground won't apply, as it's not Consecrated Ground anymore. Now, before I wrap this one up, I have to say that I love the theme of Broken Faith, from the appropriate name to the equally appropriate flavor text and how it all fits together. This is a shield after all, but most of the defensive aspects have been stripped back, from converting a defensive ground effect to an offensive one, to incentivizing having no energy shield and even going as far as removing part of the innate block chance. It's a really fun item and I think it's actually quite serviceable now following the change to Unholy Might. And yet, only a handful of players use this shield in 3.24 across all leagues, so why isn't it used more often? Well, I think it should be mentioned here that changes such as the one to Unholy Might often take a while until their impacts start to set in. There was a ton of other changes in Necropolis as well, and this shield is likely flying under the radar a little bit. But it's also the case that the shield slot is very valuable. There's incredible defensive options such as Dawnbreaker or Aegis Aurora, and equally powerful offensive uniques like Wrathpith Globe or Malachi's Loop, while crafted shields can provide useful stats such as spell suppression, life, or even gem levels and increased damage. With that said, I do expect Broken Faith to see a bit more use in coming leagues, once the Unholy Might change sets in a bit more. Thank you to my patrons for supporting this channel, I appreciate it a lot. If you enjoy the content I make here on YouTube, check out the Patreon I've linked in the description below for details on how you can support this channel going forward. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.